Welcome back. The Air Force will test a new way to distribute tasks for cybersecurity operations in defense. Delivering capabilities from individual forces, though, may not be the right model for great power competition. Tim Walton is fellow at the Center for Defense Concepts and Technology at the Hudson Institute. He's writing about force design and mission integration with Brian Clark and Dan Patt. Tim, welcome. It's good to see you. Thanks for coming on. You and your colleagues write, this report describes a new model for joint force design and integration. What's wrong with the old model?
Thank you for having me on, Francis. Well, the old model takes a relatively static approach to trying to anticipate what the future demands will be. It has the current joint staff as a process where they try to set out requirements 10, 20 years in the future and try to meet those requirements. This had worked, and it works perhaps for large capital platforms like ships or aircraft. But what we're seeing is that there's this new digital transformation where there's a whole suite of new software-driven technologies that DoD is really lagging in taking advantage of. So we need a new approach that's going to be able to match development sort of in the commercial software space, where we see a transition from large mainframe computers to personal computers to now just a whole Internet of Things devices that don't all have the same software, right? They have the custom software or apps that you want to download. And military forces, if they're able to similarly shift and have what we term heterogeneity at scale, where they can have many different types of software apps and capabilities and can interoperate together, they'd be more effective at posing dilemmas for adversaries.
In your mind, are the services on the right track with the software organizations that they're building? You know, when Will Roper came in to the Air Force a number of years ago, he basically said it's software, 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 and the force has taken that on. The Army, the Navy, Marine Corps have built their own software development operations. Are they headed in the right direction, do you think, Tim?
Well, the services have done a great job of establishing these different software factories or working with sort of a new, larger range of defense contractors that can provide software solutions. The challenge has been, though, is that there's a mismatch between the new authorities for acquisition of that software and the actual budgeting approach. Sort of the budgeting process takes 2 years at least, where it takes 1 year for DoD to decide what it wants and then another year for Congress to actually appropriate those funds. And what we contend is that there's a need for a new, more flexible or fungible approach to both software and then other types of acquisition where there could be opportunities for moving that funding around a little bit more. Last year, Congress had a new program for software acquisition where now it's going to be a little more easier to move around funding from acquisition to operations and maintenance and research development and test and evaluation. Moving forward, we think that that similar, more fungible approach is needed so that when programs are performing very well in terms of software, you can add more money to them more quickly and accelerate them. And then when they're performing poorly, you can cut those funds and reallocate them to the ones that are needed.
All right, you call what you and your colleagues write about an operational challenge vignette. What is that, and what does this vignette consist of? What's the model here that you're suggesting?
Sure. An operational vignette is a story that military planners can use to try to envision how future warfare may play out. In our report, we talk about a challenging operation for the Department of Defense today, which is the defense of critical assets in Okinawa, in particular Kadena Air Base in Okinawa, where many Chinese forces could attack it using a range of air and missile threats. We think moving forward, it'd be helpful if the combatant commands can develop what we call mission integration cells that can focus on these pressing operational problems using new modeling and simulation tools to figure out, well, what are the best solutions for these problems? And then there would be mission managers or new individuals in the Office of the Secretary of Defense who can track more carefully what are the funds that are actually going to solve those problems. And the goal would be so that the combatant commands, such as Indo-PACOM, would receive the funding they actually need to solve these pressing operational problems.
That's what I referred to at the beginning of this conversation about shifting from a joint forces model where you have a force developing something. You're advocating more of a command funnel pipeline for different capabilities, it sounds like. Is that a fair read on my part?
That's right. We call it a federated approach, but it'd be a shift from the current very centralized approach where pretty much the services are almost completely responsible for determining what's going to get bought in concurrence with the Joint Staff's requirements process, to a new approach where there are going to be new opportunities for combatant commands to provide inputs, especially for what are the quick 1 to 2 year improvements that could be pursued by DoD in terms of new software interoperability solutions, or in terms of posture funding to build new decoys or necessary military construction. Hopefully this approach will be faster, and what we contend is that the Congress should pursue in this year's National Defense Authorization Act a pilot program to just try out whether an approach like this would work at solving 1 or 2 challenging operational problems. And if it's helpful, it could be scaled out throughout DoD.
We have about 30 seconds left, Tim. How do you judge if that pilot's successful?
It'd be successful, I guess, in 2 different ways. One would be there'd be a better alignment between what Indo-PACOM has requested in requests such as the Pacific Deterrence Initiative and what's actually funded by Congress. There was an enormous mismatch in this year's Pacific Deterrence Initiative report and what the Pentagon submitted to Congress. But the other metric of success would be shifting from an approach that focuses on the cost of systems to the value, or how can DoD improve its performance in campaign outcomes? And those mission managers would be able to track that more carefully.
Tim, thanks very much for coming on. Congratulations to you and your colleagues on this work.
Thank you, Francis.